the movement. Create your free listing on www.connector.com. In light of the current climate in America, it's more important than ever for communities to come together. Are you a business owner looking to make a positive impact in your community? Now is the perfect time to take action. By creating a free listing on Connector.com, you can help build a new digital beloved community where everyone thrives. Your business can be a vital resource for residents, offering essential services and fostering connections. By joining our platform, you not only gain visibility, but also contribute to a network that embodies inclusivity, support, and empowerment. Don't wait. Create your free listing on Connector.com, download the app, and help us shape a beloved community. Welcome to a Widow Story podcast. My name is Kim, and I'm the host. Today, I have a very special guest, and I have a great show in store for you guys. But before we start, if you haven't already, please go and subscribe to the channel, hit that like button, and make sure that you share. So today, we have Sarah Hartnett. She's here with us today, and I'm so excited. I'm so happy that she decided to join us today for this podcast. Welcome, welcome, welcome.
Thank you so much. I'm excited to be here.
Yes. So guys, I just want to briefly, before we get started, I wanted to say how I found her because when I moved here, I had been searching for a widows group. Just trying to, reach out, kind of network, trying to find someone, and I could never find anyone. It was just really weird. I think I had did a search a while ago, and maybe I found someone that was having maybe a widow's luncheon or brunch or something. And I remember when I saw it, I thought that majority of the members that were attending, because they had pictures and they were all so much older. So I was like, oh, well, maybe I should just try to find something else. And then once I started the podcast and I was looking for guests, I just continued to keep searching. And I couldn't find anybody. And then one day I ran across this page. And I was like, okay, there's this widow group, and it was in North Dallas, which is kind of close to where I stay. So I was very, I guess you can say, intrigued. And I searched and searched and searched. I sent the message, a DM to that page, and I didn't get a response. And so I searched and searched and searched to find anyone to respond. And of course, it took me a while, and I couldn't find anybody. But one night, in the middle of the night, probably around 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, I decided to go back on that page, and I just searched everybody. I went through everybody's comments and everything, and I finally found Sarah. And I reached out, and I was just like, hey, I want you to be on the show. Do you mind? And she was just said yes. I didn't have to beg or do anything. So I really appreciate that. And because this widow world is really crazy. It's really crazy. And of course, I read a little bit of your story that you posted. Mm-hmm. And I think the thing that caught my eye was that you became a widow 2 months to the exact date of when my husband passed. So my husband passed August the 12th of 2021, and then yours passed in October, right? October 12th. And so I definitely want to talk about your story. But I think that what I most am so excited to talk about is your journey through everything. I think this is going to be so different. I think that there is going to be some people that are really going to be able to appreciate this. They're going to get some healing from this. And I'm excited to talk to you about it.
I'm excited too.
So I want to get started. I just want you to tell me a little bit kind of about your love story, and then how, what happened, and then we'll just go from there.
Okay, great. Well, I'm excited to be here. My had a beautiful story with Dan. We actually met, it's been over 30 years, on spring break while in Spain. Both of our dads were Air Force, and we were stationed in Germany at the time. And my 8th grade year and Dan's junior year of high school, we went on the same kind of big student trip to Lloret de Mar, Spain. And we met down there and kind of hit it off. And I was younger and he really wasn't going to date me until I got to high school. So he waited till my freshman year and he was a senior, and we dated that whole year in Germany and fell in love, and it was beautiful and it was amazing. And then at the end of that year, both of our dads were getting reassigned to the United States. He went straight to college from Germany, and I had 3 more years of high school. And back then, there's no cell phones, there's no even email at that time. And so we did what we really could do, which is we broke up only because of proximity, and decided, that we were going to remain friends and stay connected the best we could. And so we did, and we both kind of went on to date other people, and I ended up marrying somebody that I met, at the end of high school and dated all through college. And Dan was a guest at that wedding. We were friends, and fast forward, I went through a divorce after 8 years, and when I moved home to my parents' house here in Dallas, I had a 1-year-old, which is Sadie, my oldest, who's now 20. And it was during that time that I knew no one in Dallas. And this is where Dan had, after college, come and gotten a job. And so we just, reconnected. We had always kind of been friends, but reconnected and fell in love again, and we're married. And it's funny, our high school yearbook, Dan had said, "Please wait 7 years for me." He wanted me to wait 3 years of high school and 4 years of college. And it ended up being 17 years later. Oh, wow. So we married in 2008 and went on to have Lila, who is my next daughter. So I have Sadie and Lila, and just built a really beautiful life here in North Dallas. We're in Plano, and married for 13 years. And then obviously everybody knows about the pandemic that hit. And so really in 2021, we had just finished having an amazing summer, and the girls had started back to school. And that second week of school, Dan felt a little funny. He was like, I think I'm going to go get tested. He got tested. He was positive. So we all got tested. Sadie and Lila also tested positive. I tested negative, but we all quarantined at home. And we were almost to the end of that, magic 8 or 9 day period. And so excited to just break loose. We'd all just been doing our own thing at the house. Really hadn't seemed sick. I had been laying out in the pool and the kids just kind of hanging out. And Dan had been working at his desk all week long, just as, watching TV at night together, all the things. And that final night, I had fixed dinner and we were all sitting around, and Lila came in and said, well, Dad said he's going to lay down for a minute instead of coming to dinner. And I was just like, okay, no big deal. And a couple of minutes into dinner, I just felt something shift in me that said, why don't you go check on Dan? And, because that just something, I think it was the Holy Spirit prompted me. I went in the bedroom and he was laying there just perfectly silent and had the covers pulled up. And I just kind of watched his face, and he looked, like he just looked a little different. And he kind of opened his eyes, and I just said, hey, babe, what's going on? Are you okay? How are you feeling? And he just said something really strange. He goes, I just wish this cough would go away. And I didn't get it because he hadn't been coughing. Like I don't remember him coughing that whole week we were home. And so I didn't understand the statement. And I had a pulse oximeter that I had never used. It was still in the box. I didn't even really know what those were and what they did. And I got it out of the box. I put it on his finger, And it was in the 70s. And I didn't know what that meant. And like what it was supposed to be and what it was. My dad's a doctor. I called him on the phone. I said, Dad, Dan's, this pulse oximeter read 70 something. And my dad just said, Sarah, you need to get Dan up and you need to take him to the hospital right now. That's really, really low. I almost blacked out. I almost passed out. Just the blood just shifted. I had to lay on the ground because just the world, I was like, what in the world is happening here? And I got up and I said, Dan, we're going to go to the hospital. And he didn't fight me at all. He just said, okay. And I said, the girls are still eating at the counter. And I just get on his flip-flops. It just said, girls, I'll be back. And I drove him to the nearest hospital. It's just a few miles away. And I dropped him at the front door of the ER and I went to park. It took me maybe 90 seconds to walk in. And by the time I walked in, he was walking away and he just kind of looked over his shoulder. They had already put oxygen in his nose and that was it. That was the last I saw Dan up and able to communicate. So for the next week, he was on the oxygen, all the things. He started the COVID protocol that they had in place, but they wouldn't let me in at that time. And they basically just said, we just need to run through these medicines and he'll probably be good to go and he'll get out. And it was scary, but you're just thinking he just needs a little supplemental, this is not that serious. It wasn't serious before he left.
Right.
And we talked maybe twice during that time on FaceTime. It was hard because he had the mask on. He, he's couldn't get deep breaths. And then, about a week into it, I don't remember, 10 days into it, I get a call from the hospital and missed the call. They say, you need to call back right away, right now. And Dan had, they had put him on a ventilator. So they had called to tell me and I had missed that. And the crazy thing is they let me in to see him that day. So as soon as I couldn't talk to him, was like, hey, come on in. He's now on a ventilator. And so, yeah, that started a month-long journey of him being sedated and, thinking if he can just make it to the end of the week without a fever, he'll, we can move towards a trach and all the ups and downs. It was a nightmare and honestly just a nightmare. And really towards the end in October, I had what felt like the whole world praying for his recovery and a miracle. And he actually went into cardiac arrest multiple times one night. And then the following day, all his numbers started improving. We thought, oh my gosh, we've got this miracle. They kept bringing him back and only to realize, a week later when they could do a CT scan that he was brain dead. And so then at that point I had to take him off life support. And that was October 12th. So, it's surreal now 3.5 years later to think that we, I don't want to say just survived that. It was just so traumatic. So, the fear, the anxiety, the uncertainty, it wasn't instant death like your story. And yet it wasn't prolonged where we actually got to have any last conversations with Dan either. None of us ever got to say goodbye. Nobody got to understand anything. It was, instant, but waiting. And, so that's, devastating, rocks your world. It just was, thinking about it, takes me back to just how life altering that was.
Yeah. And I still think that that's still so traumatic. I mean, it wasn't as sudden, but I mean, just to think that you still just wasn't able to say goodbye. You know, that was still, I mean, that's so hard, you know. So I think it's still sudden, even though you don't, I still think that's real sudden. And I know that during that time, like COVID was really, I felt like it was around, that was towards the end of it. Yes. So of course, I'm sure that you weren't thinking that this was going to happen, you know?
Yeah. You just, and praying. I mean, the thing is through that whole thing, I was taking it to the Lord. I mean, the not just before Dan got sick. I mean, in terms of just the pandemic itself, you know, I just remember in writing in my journal, just praying for God's protection, his wisdom on how to handle the pandemic, you know, just what all of it, I was seeking God through the process. And so it was kind of a you know, it's one of those things where you're like, okay, God, you know, I was you know, all the things, wanting to follow you and your guidance in this, and you know, there's still just so much around that's unknown at this point, and what's right, what's wrong, and you know, but it's want to be a statistic of the only pandemic any of us have ever lived through in this lifetime is, you know, it's its own weird sect of trauma and people who went through it and stuff. You know?
I totally can understand that. Like, I get it.
Because everybody has so many opinions about it and thoughts, and you know, it's still
right. And so I think you're probably the first person that I've met that has lost a spouse from COVID. And so, you know, hearing your story is kind of, it's traumatic to me. I hear people's story and I kind of forget that, you know, I went through trauma too, but it's every story is so different, and it's just, it amazes me. And then of course, I know that when I lost Chris, because he also was pronounced brain dead. I went through like this little period where I thought I was kind of angry at God because I felt like, you know, I had been praying, I had been doing all of these things. And at the time I was fasting. So I just knew that Chris was going to live, because I was like, I'm fasting. Like I was about to work a miracle, you know? And so, and it didn't happen. So I remember how I felt. Did you have any of those feelings or?
You know, I don't think I went through any length of period of time of an anger phase that I recall. Now, I definitely think there were moments that I brought my questions to the Lord on, you know, I do not get this. Like you know, when you're talking about the people, you know, the amount of people praying and anointing oil and fasting and people's visions or thought. I mean, you had so many reasons for hope, and you know, the whole time my cry, what I felt early on in that month while Dan was hospitalized was God, the Holy Spirit woke me up one day and he said, I want you to be bold and transparent with your story. And that's, you know, when it kind of grew and a lot of people were following it, is because, you know, I was scared to be vulnerable. I was scared of judgment. I was scared of people asking questions or basically saying, well, what did you think would happen this way? You know, all this. And when you open yourself to a public forum, you know, that wasn't private and you're asking for prayer, you are going to get trolls. You're going to get a lot of people. But it was worth it to me because, one, I wanted as many people praying about Dan as possible. But, you know, I felt at the time like, oh, he's going to have me sharing publicly, because when the big miracle happens, God's going to get all the glory for this. And I think that's all of our human desire when people think that they're sharing. And I have to reflect back now, 3.5 years later, and realize that the story has just gotten that much bigger, and there has been that much more glory to God than maybe had Dan survived. And at that momentary miracle, it would have been like, wow. But the real miracle is, or maybe is what has continued to be the voice of maybe me praising God through the storm, and how you can still trust in a good Father and a good God when the outcome did not go your way, when you didn't get the miracle that you thought you were supposed to get. And I have to believe that his ways are higher than our ways. And so I think that's kind of where your faith comes in, when you just realize, like, are you still going to believe and trust God even when life is really hard and messy, and it doesn't look on earth the way it is in heaven?
I love that. I love that. And I feel like, me looking back, I definitely felt like at that moment, I didn't know then, I always say, like, I was raised in a church, so I was Christian, and I thought I had a relationship with him, right? And it wasn't until after Chris, and then it was like, it birthed this relationship with him. And it's so crazy, because it's like, out of that has come so much joy in my life, in this relationship with God that I didn't have. And, I think that is the bigger, like you said, miracle that happens. And so I love that. I love how you stated that. I love that. I love that. And so moving forward, I know that, speaking with you, your journey in this has definitely, it's been different, I don't know how to put it, but you have moved on, and you've remarried, and you're now living, a life, what you could say, with another person after a spouse. And I know many people have opinions and thoughts about this. And I know I've stated this before, that I desire to get married again. And so I think that people don't understand, like, the things that we go through. So I'm so excited to talk to you about this, because we have so many emotions eternally that we're dealing with. And then we have so many things from the world that we also have to experience. And so it makes our journey just a little bit harder, because I don't think that we really know how to navigate. And nobody is really talking about it. Nobody is really saying, hey, it's okay, or this is, what you can do. And so, we hear, oh, you can grieve, you can do this. But then whenever we step outside of, if it's just not crying or being stuck in the bed or just being depressed, then everybody's like, wait a minute, you're moving too fast. Are you even sad? Like, why are you doing this? And so, I love that I'm getting to talk to you about this, you know? And so, just kind of tell me a little bit about, when did you know that you wanted to get remarried? Like, was this was it something that you felt, or did you just feel like you wanted to move on, or what did that feeling feel like for you?
Okay, a couple of things. I think there's, how do I put this? From many widows that I've talked to over the last couple of years, I think almost immediately you think, I'll never find anyone else. This person's the love of my life. How will I, how can anything come from now this total devastation and brokenness? And then at the same exact time, there's a spot that almost immediately needs to go into a hopeful place. Like, Lord, please don't let this be the end of my story. I can't live in brokenness and devastation the rest of my life. But how that looked, I think early on, I ran to Jesus immediately.
Mm-hmm.
And I had already cultivated a deep relationship with Jesus before Dan died. And that was a saving grace because I wasn't starting from, I already felt intimacy with him. And then it only grew more during, over all of this time where he, I knew no one else was going to save me but Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
There wasn't going to be another marriage that was going to save me, So my journey was that I just poured it all out to the Lord, like every day. I took it all and kind of laid it at his feet. And I knew what my heart desired, which was that, of course, I didn't want to live the rest of my life alone. I was only 45 when it happened. But I also knew that God's will had to be it for me.
Mm-hmm.
So if his will was for me to be single, then I had to come to an acceptance of that.
Right.
And because I knew that's where the joy was going to be at. It was not going to be in dating or finding another man.
It's so true.
I had to come to a place that said, God, this is what my heart desires. And I worried. It's like, but what if that isn't what your heart desires for me? How am I going to make peace with that and then be okay? And then know that you'll provide still a beautiful life, because it's not one or the other. It's not every widow who, if you don't remarry, then God's saying, hey, I've got leftovers second best for you, because that's not what a good father does for his kids. And so I kept telling God what I wanted. And at the same time, I kept praying for God to give me the peace that it just is what his way was going to be the best way. But this is a really interesting and fun story, a God story. I was wearing my wedding ring for many months afterwards. I loved my wedding ring. It had started to wear thin on the bottom, but I started praying. I prayed about the smallest details of things. And I asked God, I just said, God, I don't know when to take off my wedding ring. It's not about dating again, but I mean, am I going to wear this for whatever? And I just said, you'll have to break my ring, and that's when I'll know you want me to take off the ring.
Okay.
And I'm praying in my car out loud. I'm like, Lord, you have to break my ring. A week later, my ring splits. It just completely breaks.
Okay.
I'm shocked. I'm just like, I know I just prayed that. This can't be real. You didn't really just answer me exactly how I asked you to do it. So I taped it up and said, I'm going to continue to wear my ring, even though you basically just answered my prayer directly 1 week later. Then I'm going to this conference, the Never Alone Widow Conference in Atlanta. And it's funny, I wanted more. I wanted more confirmation. And I was going to this big widow conference, and I was sure that when I got down, God was just going to make it so clear on this 2-day trip about my ring. And I'm praying about it. And even though he had already answered. So I go down there and nothing specific happens at this retreat. And I'm honestly disappointed. I'm like, God, this is what I was asking, more confirmation. I come home from this retreat, and it's the night I fly home. I'm sitting in the kitchen with Sadie and Lila, and the doorbell rings. And I go out and answer the door, and nobody's there. And there's a little gift bag on my front step, and I bring it inside, and I open it, and it's a ring, and it's a tiny gold band, and it just has a little D, a little circle with a D. And I instantly knew God once again was saying, look, I already answered you.
Mm-hmm.
Now's the time to take off your wedding ring.
Wow.
But you wanted more. So I'm going to give you this ring to put on your finger in place of that. So I did not know who had dropped it off. I found out it was somebody from my Sunday school class. But when I messaged her, I just said, you don't understand, this was an answer to prayer. And she goes, it's so strange. I bought this ring months and months ago, but tonight the Holy Spirit told me, and she lives like maybe 30, 40 minutes from my house, get off your couch right now and drive that ring and place it at Sarah's doorstep. Tonight is the night.
I got chills.
So my journey, that's just one aspect, like that was months before I was ready to date. Mm-hmm. That was just about taking off my wedding ring, because God was simply saying, like, I've got you. Mm-hmm. I've got you every step. If you follow me, I'm going to lead you the right way. Mm-hmm. And trust me in the process, trust me in the journey. And so, moving forward, there was one time, and I journaled almost daily, my prayers. And one day I wrote what I was looking for in a man, mm-hmm. And and it's not all like super serious. Some is, I want him tall, or I want him athletic. Mm-hmm. He's got to be able to, play golf, because my dad and my brothers play golf, mm-hmm. things that just are small, but then obviously important things, heart matters too. And I just started writing a list. And at the very end, I kind of laughed and I said, God, this sounds like a unicorn, not that any of the things were so impossible, but just mm-hmm. all together, all of them. I said, if I could be so lucky, I'm just going to tell him what I want. Mm-hmm. And you're allowed to do that. And I had such intimacy with him. It was just like when you've been married for a long time, and I had an amazing marriage with Dan, and I loved him, and we would have been married the rest of our lives. But after being married for many years, also then what quirks you two have, what areas you struggle in. One of the areas that Dan and I had to work really, really hard on was communication. He was quieter, and he kept things in and didn't maybe share as much. And so I knew that was an area that we had to work on. Mm-hmm. And so if I was allowed to ask, if I was ever going to remarry or find somebody, I wanted that area to be easier the next time. Know yourself mm-hmm. at this stage of life, the woman I've become now at 45 compared to when I met Dan at 14, when I married him at 32, is a very different woman. And so I just laid it all before the Lord, like I was mm-hmm. everything else. And, so that was it, and then fast forward, several more months, it really was around the 1 year mark where I knew I was just feeling joyful again. And mm-hmm. I wasn't seeking out because I was bored, or I just need, or even the loneliness, because mm-hmm. I really kind of said to God, like, one, I needed to be okay, just myself, mm-hmm. and I didn't want to go seek not that is a wrong reason that people find companionship. I think that's a very healthy reason. If you're lonely, you find friends or whatever. But for me, I just wanted to be in a really good spot. Mm-hmm. I wanted to feel ready before I put myself back out there. And mm-hmm. I was just starting to feel ready. I think the people around me, I think you could just see it in me, mm-hmm. And I had grieved pretty publicly and openly. I mean, I had not run from my grief. I had run towards my grief and towards my healing. And I think that did a lot for me because I almost made it like a full-time job at that first year. Just, not trying to fill the void. Just, I'm going to deal with this. And not that made it one and done. It doesn't, because it's grief is a lifelong journey.
Right.
But, that's at least how I got to where, in terms of the feeling that I knew I was ready to start dating.
Yes.
So
your story, you kind of made it public and everything. Did you said people could see that you was ready to date. Did you receive any criticism? Were you getting support? How is that for you?
Well, so I had done, I think, on my stories, my Instagram stories, probably a question and answer that summer leading into the 1 year. So, Dan went to the hospital in August. So, that was, even though he didn't die till October, he had been gone since August. Around that time, I kind of did a question and answer. And I think somebody asked, just a follower asked, do you think you'll date? Would you want to date? And I answered the question publicly on my Insta. I just said, yeah, I haven't started to date yet, but I will be open to dating. I know that I will want to date. I just said it. And James, who I am now married to, happened to watch that story. So I think he saw it, and we were distant acquaintances. We had met maybe 2-3 times in a 15-year period at larger parties that Dan and I were at. So we have mutually really close friends in common, knew of each other, but actually, just rarely were ever at the same place. So we weren't even really connected even on social media until I think the year before Dan died. I think we became friends on Facebook because my cousin was out on his boat one day or something. So, so when my story was really public and when I was grieving and asking for prayer for Dan, James actually, and I didn't know this until after we dated and stuff. I mean, he had shared my, all of my stuff out to his page and asked for prayer, really not even knowing, just knowing of Dan and I, please, pray for Dan. We want this man to come back to his wife and daughters, and, just wept for me. I mean, his heart was obviously just, he had always seen Dan and I and kind of our marriage from afar and always been like, wow, that's, it seems like a marriage I would aspire to and want. He had been, divorced for many years and been doing the dating scene, and that's hard and stuff. And so it was just interesting because when I did that story, actually it was my birthday in September. So fast forward into September, I went out with some friends for my birthday, and he just commented on one of my stories. And he was just like, wow, you look just really beautiful today. I hope you have a great birthday. It's just so good to see you smiling. I love seeing you smile and stuff. And so I wrote back and thanks. And I had probably thousands of messages over that last year from people. And again, it wasn't until I went back way after we had started dating to realize that there were times that he had responded to stories and just said, I'm praying for you or something like that. And maybe I just hearted it, or I was in the middle of deep grief, or said thank you, and had very minimal interaction. But that one, I remembered, and I think I just said, hey, if you'd ever want to go get a drink or dinner, no expectations, I'd love to, or something like that. And I remember just thinking, again, I hadn't put myself out there to actually date. I hadn't gotten on any sites or anything. And I just said, and I wasn't even really thinking date. I just said, sure, that sounds fun. Because at this point I'm like,
just friends.
We're ready. I'm just ready to be social or whatever. So I said, that sounds fun. And I think he put his number in the message. And I just said, no, I'm not, like I didn't say anything. I just said, well, here's my number.
Right.
10 seconds later, my cell phone dings and he goes, how does this week look for you? And I just laughed and I said, wow, you're fast. And so he's like, not messing around. So anyway, we met for an early dinner that next week and that was it. Like it was that one dinner and, that just, I never dated anybody else. And I could just tell there was a spark and, that dinner, led to another meetup with some friends. And, it just, it's just crazy. It's a weird thing at this age. It's weird when you've been married a long time, and obviously I knew Dan after my divorce. So I never had to really date after that again either. So we're talking about from high school to 45, I had not ever done that kind of dating, online dating. I hadn't ever had to venture to that.
You're blessed.
Yeah. So I, but even I don't know. It was just, but it was, so in terms of people, I think it's interesting because I was public about it. People, I don't think were totally shocked. I think it was to my benefit to be as open as I was because people had a vested interest in watching me heal. It didn't necessarily, I didn't just disappear into grief and then all of a sudden I pop up with somebody out, it was, I think what was more difficult is people having an opinion of who they think you should end up with, who you should date, not necessarily that, are you ready to date? It's, what is that when you finally say yes and everybody's like, yeah, of course you deserve to be happy. You deserve to, but then all of a sudden it's like, oh, well, that guy, that doesn't necessarily fit what we thought was going to be your next choice or whatever, so that was probably more, I kept James and I a little bit in a bubble for about a month to 5 weeks, where I wasn't sharing on anything on social media that I was out because I did. My kids follow me, their friends follow me, teachers. I mean, lots of people, and you just don't know what you're doing yet. And you don't know which way it's going to go. And you aren't ready to take something really private and get the scrutiny that you're going to get when you make it public, because people, whether I wouldn't say it's nosy, they cared. I had allowed them to care because I had shared so much. So then sure, they're going to care when I finally say, hey, let me introduce you to who I'm, deciding to date or whatever. So, that kind of came with the territory. And, it was, you fumble your way through it. I don't think I did it perfectly. I think I probably hurt some people's feelings. I think I didn't invite everybody in my closest circle into the process because I didn't know what I was doing. And you're grieving and you're raising your kids as a single mom, and you are juggling so many things. And so I didn't go and get people's approval or permission. I guess not that I needed permission, but you know what I'm saying? Like, I think some people who love me and care and are deeply care about my life maybe would have thought, oh, well, you would have picked up the phone and immediately said I met, but I didn't. I kept it. And, so I had to navigate what that looked like when then I was ready to kind of start opening up that communication to people, and And my gosh, we just can't do it all right. You know,
Right.
you can't go back and, you know, change
Right.
how.
You can't make everybody happy.
Yeah, you can't.
And I think that, you know, I always say, no matter what situation, you're always going to have some people that, even if they have your best interests at heart,
Mhm.
sometimes their opinions are just probably not like, it may not be what you need. Little naysayers. And even though they think that they are doing things out of love
Yes,
in the
100%.
right way.
Yes.
So I think that it's good that you move that way. Like you
And you know
navigated
that their
through that.
grief, the people
Right.
closest to you most likely also have grief
Right.
related to the loss of your spouse. If they
Right.
loved you, they knew him.
Mhm.
And so their thoughts and emotions naturally also come into play as how does this affect me? How does your new person affect how? And one thing that I realize is that everybody grieves. It's a different timeline. For us, we're living, it's our day to day life. We wake up and we open our eyes and our person is not here. So
Right.
we spend all day living a life, whereas everybody else who loved Dan deeply and deeply grieved him, their day-to-day life looked no different.
Right.
Whatever was going on in their homes, and it doesn't take away from how
Yeah.
desperately
Mhm.
they miss him or grieve the loss. It was our life that imploded, not
Mhm.
their lives that
Mhm.
imploded. And so then when you have moved and done the work, so for that year, what seems maybe short to somebody else or whatever, I knew what a year-long process of deep grief and hard work looked like, that all of a sudden to somebody who maybe can be a little out of sight, out of mind. Now, I don't want to ever say that Dan was out of their mind or whatever, but you know,
Mhm.
they weren't living with the day-to-day
Mhm.
things. Then all of a sudden the thought of me dating probably spurred on some grief in like, what? Like, because it brought up something they didn't have to face every day.
Mhm.
Does that make
Mhm.
sense?
Mhm. No, I totally get it.
So I think when I shared like with Dan's family initially, that was very hard. That
Mhm.
felt fast for them. You know, it was just like a shock. You know,
Right.
they saw how devastated we were. It was such a hard, but they live all the way in California. And then all of a sudden it just seemed like, whoa, okay, I didn't see this coming. And yet they weren't doing, you know, my life day to day with me and the girls and what that looked like. And,
Mhm.
you know, and
I think, yeah, I
just,
definitely understand. I think that that's probably one of the scariest things. Even, I mean, I don't know what that feels like. Of course, I'm not
Mhm.
married, but I think that the fear of maybe, you know, like hurting someone's feelings, you know, when people, you know, like you said, they were part of, you know, your spouse's life. They was a part of his life, like Chris's life. And to think that moving on can make them feel a certain way, it kind of makes, you know, me scared to navigate into these different, you know, waters. But again, like you said, there's so many things that people don't understand. Like you wake up and there's the little simple things, like there's, you know, nobody in the shower, or there's nobody to check on you, or there's nobody to hug, and there's nobody to talk to. And it's the little small things that you miss so much, you know? And I remember I shared, like, you know, just things that I didn't even like. Like, I didn't even like flowers, but Chris was still, you know, buy me flowers every week. And it's things like that I just like, I miss those things, right? And so when you just don't have that day-to-day, you know, life with that person anymore, and your life changes so much. It's so much different. And I think that the thought process is so much different. So I totally understand everything that you know, you said, for sure. How I want to talk about like this post, I guess, that I read about on Facebook. I saw this about probably like 2 or 3 days ago. So I joined this widows grieving group once Chris had passed. And so I'm in it still. And of course I still read the post. And there was this guy, and he was talking about he had got remarried. And so when he got remarried, well, when his spouse died, his daughter was 2. And so it was like her birthday, and he decided that he was going to post make a post for her birthday, and he posted a picture with his late spouse, his late wife, and his daughter when she was a baby. And he had got remarried, so now he's in this relationship, and his, his current wife, and she gets upset. And she, he says that she stated she was upset because to her, and I don't remember, his daughter's age or anything, but it must have been like maybe it was some years ago. So I'm just going to speculate and say that maybe the daughter's like 12 or 13. So for the current spouse, she feels like I'm the mom. And so she felt like she was embarrassed that he posted this picture of this other woman with their now daughter. And, because she feels like I've been raising her this whole time, right? And so it caused this divide between them. And I think that that's another scary part because, he went on to update the post and say that they were now living separately because she just couldn't deal with those emotions. So I think that the other part is how, making our new partners, like, if I am dating someone and I go into this space of dating them, how do I navigate that as well? Because I was married, right? I was married to this person. They passed. He's the father of my children. He, it's not like I divorced him. He's a part of my life, and I can't not talk about him. I can't not still, remember who he was and all of the things that we had. But again, like I want to have this life with another person as well, right? So I feel like, I don't know, I guess internally, like, how do I go about, moving into this space because I have like all of these emotions and how's this person going to feel and how are they going to, react? Because I don't want to hurt them. Right. And so I think that that's something that's real. I think that there's something that's, it's not discussed at all. So how was it for you, dealing with your now spouse as far as like having to still keep that memory alive for your daughters and,
yeah, I mean, gosh, it is an ongoing, I think, process navigating it. So first of all, one of the things on my list that I prayed for was somebody that could love and honor Dan. That was huge because that is, it's just massive. And so I needed to find the man that I was going to be looking for needed to have the qualities that he could on some level, though he might not understand because he's not walked the road, that he made space for Dan. So I would say that James, especially you initially dating and stuff, just, well, and continues to, but does an exceptional job of making that space. But again, it is a process. So, I think initially dating was one thing, because he knew, watch my story unfold. It was, he understood that I, especially dating, was still grieving, even, I think I never changed anything in my house prior to marriage. So it wasn't like if I was going to start dating, you were going to walk in and not see Dan. That never crossed my mind. My house, the pictures of Dan are there, and they're still there. So dating, it didn't occur to me to be like, oh, I'm a widow, who passed. And so you're going to walk in and see my family pictures. Like, I'm not hiding that from anybody. Then, when we decided to get married, and James moved to my house, that is a big deal. he's selling and getting rid of most of his belongings that were his home to come to a fully done house that is the house that I created with Dan. I think, James and I talk about it all the time. One, there's no support or groups out there for people like us, like the blending of families, and then especially like from a widowed perspective. We would love to see that down the line be a resource to other people navigating such a complex thing, because I think James felt isolated at the beginning with not knowing who he could really talk to express, because nobody else was in our situation, Thankfully, I think he would say a major component has been God just giving him the grace to handle the complexity of it. Because he would not say that it just came perfectly easy. Like that he didn't have his moments of feeling like, he shared with me, and I'm sure he wouldn't mind me sharing with people because it's important, but am I living somebody else's life? Like, am I walking in and moving in? And that was more, I don't think he feels that way now, 2 years in, but we've done a lot of work together to do that process, I think, at the beginning. And I was thankful because when he was vulnerable and he shared some of the things, like he loves seeing the pictures of Dan around, but I've then incorporated James and I and the kids, and so more in prominent places around the house. It's, we just basically blended the family pictures, like it's James and his son and our daughter-in-law. And I took down pictures, but some are still up and they're not all gone, but it just is, when he would mention a few things to me and just share his heart, I immediately took those to heart. So like, for instance, I think there was a wedding picture of a whole family picture of me with Dan, but our whole extended family in the laundry room, which is where the coffee maker was. And I think one day, there's pictures everywhere with Dan, but this one place is he's going in every morning and making his coffee. And he just sees this one picture and he just was like, that's the first thing I'm looking at every day. It's like a house that's not, like it's still y'all's or something. And I immediately changed out that picture. And I immediately have a full family picture of James and our wedding, all extended family. And he's so appreciated. So it's not because he didn't need me to change it all. He just would have moments that this, just one thing would catch him funny. For instance, changing my last name that first year, I was holding off because I wasn't finished with probate because we have businesses and there was just added stuff that what might have made it more complicated if my name was then in the process of changing paperwork. But, that mattered to James. It mattered that I became Sarah Hartnett and, and it was something simple or minor, that just made a big difference with me hearing him. So when I hear things like that, it's not like I fault either one of those. I can 100% understand the woman who, if she's now 12 and was 2, and she became her mom and had been raising her, why there's got to be more to the story than that one, because it couldn't have been just 12, 10 years later, he posts. There had to have been a buildup that either he never was acknowledging her. It's so sad because it is one of those, one thing that I love that James did is on my anniversary to Dan last year, which is only like 2 weeks apart from mine with James. They're both this month in May. And
faith in every thread, style in every step. Shop a Stylish Heart faith-based sweatshirts today. www.astylishheart.com.
So one of the things that James did that blew me away last year for my anniversary to Dan is he took me out to a nice dinner, and the entire dinner he just asked me questions about Dan. He asked me to tell him like my top 3 favorite anniversaries with Dan. And it was so life-giving. It was so amazing. One, he loved it because it's not a competition. He felt like the more he learns about Dan, the more he loves Dan. I mean, he thinks Dan was an incredible man, and thank goodness I was married to an incredible man, and the father of the kids. And it was such a joy because as widows, we want to still talk about our spouses or, our deceased husbands. And we want to share stories and memories. And so what a gift to be able to share those with James. And then on my anniversary with Dan, be reminiscing about it with James. And those are such selfless acts that James has done, So if a random picture one day had made him feel funny, then I had no problem changing that picture up. I have, 10 more pictures of Dan and us as a family throughout the house. And yet, so I always want to hear his heart. I want him to be honest with me because he is my spouse now. I love James. I am so grateful for the life that we're building. I am so in love with him. And yet I also, the only way that I've gotten to him is through the story that I've lived with Dan. And he knows that. I know that. This is the path that God has put us on. And so I think it's just little touches like that where James is intentional and makes a point to honor Dan and remember Dan and bring up Dan with the girls and ask questions about Dan. And then at the same time, I think now if you were to ask him some of the initial growing pains of blending a family, we've moved through. And I'm so, it hasn't been easy. It hasn't been perfect. And, so I just appreciate the process.
I think I love your story. I wish, of course, that it was like that for us all, but of course it's not, but I totally love your story. I mean, it's awesome that you was able to find someone that was able to love, your life, of course, they came in it and they was able to accept you for who you were and able to accept, what you were going through, that grieving process. And I guess that we just really don't think about that from another person's perspective, because you were just saying how, James wished that there was, like a support group.
Yeah.
Because I guess that.
Well, he's been asked by guys. There's, again, people who follow me, and because I will share about Dan often, and I get it. They're now empathizing with James. So, and these are people maybe who even know Dan, but there's been a transition that's been made. And so these will be, guys who just not necessarily that they have a crazy strong opinion, but more like checking in on you, James. Like, how do you feel when Sarah continues to talk about Dan in her stories or share? And I think if they internalize for themselves, they're just like, dude, I would never be able to handle that, or I don't know how you do it. Not that they think I've done anything wrong.
Right.
They're just trying to put themselves there. And I think the deal is you honestly don't know how you will react or be unless you're in it. So from a bird's eye view or an outside perspective, even I can look at somebody else's situation that I do not walk and think, well, gosh, if I was them, I would have done it this way. I would do it that way. And you just don't know how you would do it. And you don't know what God's going to instill in you at that time to give you the grace and strength you need to walk through your particular path. And so, James knows, because he did kind of ask, like, and this was a legitimate question. He said, how, and he was not saying this in any tone. He was just like, will you forever identify as a widow? Because I'm married now. Right. And it's a fair question.
It is.
And it probably will evolve. Earlier on, maybe absolutely yes. Maybe 20 years from now, no. All I can do is say how I feel right at the moment. And because I lead a widows group, because I continue to talk about grief and loss, I identify as a remarried widow. I have been widowed by a man that I love. All the feelings that you as a widow have, I understand. They didn't, when I remarried James, all of a sudden make it where it's like, oh, girl, being a widow, I don't know what you're talking about. I'm married now. Like, are you kidding me? I can go back to that pain like that. I can go back to the fear, the anxiety, the loneliness. I mean, I can still have those kind of things. And so it's not fair to say that I can't identify as Dan's widow because now I'm married. And but I can understand the fairness of just saying, do I identify as James's wife? 100%. Yes. And he's got all of my heart and all of me, and all of my thoughts are forward thinking towards our marriage, our life together. What God is doing in us and through us is all future, now and future, and kingdom work. I'm not stuck in where I was, but there's still so much important work to be done around what you're trying to do, bring awareness to it. It's needed. And too many of us feel isolated and alone. And a young widow, just like fish out of water. We go from being in this life that you create a world that, revolves around, building a family and kids. And so your life kind of has all of that. And then to be thrust into not just singleness, but solo parenting and just the grief. You just can't explain to people what it's like.
Right. But I think that I love their perspective you've given, because I did not think about that. Like, I guess I do think that there would be some feelings, right? I love how you have accepted, like, this is who I am. Like, I can't change who I am, right? Yeah. So then James came in and he loved you right where you were.
Yeah.
Right? He still had that struggle. And I think that we don't really understand that other person's struggle, right? Because nobody ever really talks about what it takes to love us, right?
Yeah.
Not that it's a bad thing or.
Well, to be fair, anybody at this stage of life, maybe James's story is not nearly as public as mine is, but you don't get to a place where you get to love me and you're single at 50 or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
and not have your own story, you know?
Right.
So both of us are walking into you come to a remarriage where there's going to be pain and brokenness on both sides of your story.
Mm-hmm.
And what he has to accept from my story. And I hate to even say it like as if it's bad, because I don't think he looks at my story and thinks that, oh, I'm redeeming your broken life. He thinks that I had an amazing life and an amazing marriage. And the gift is that he gets to come in to a person who is loved well and I have so much to offer him as a wife. You know what I'm saying? I mean, he sees the benefits versus, and the same for him. I mean, his story and has brought him to the man he is today. And that has its own backstory. And so for any widow, you know, I just wouldn't want any widow to think, and I think it's natural for us to be like, who is going to take on everything that we've got? We, you know, our kids, our life. And I get it because I felt it, but also that's diminishing what beauty doesn't make it not complicated.
Right.
But my gosh, we are amazing people that are going to bless somebody else's life, and our kids will bless their life. And you know what I'm saying? Look at it as a, you know, God's got a story for all of us. And, you know, and you just have to figure out, you know, have an open heart and open ears to, you know, it makes me sad about the guy I posted. I see it a lot, but I'm friends with a lot of widows who have met amazing men. And those men have stepped into hard stories and kids without dads. And yeah, I look and we all are like, bless this man, but also I absolutely know that man is feeling blessed by the family he's getting. You know what I'm saying? And that's the beauty of what God does, you know, like, you know, just,
I mean, I think that's like definitely a great take on it. Great take on it. I think that sometimes as a widow, and I kind of talked about it a little bit, and I didn't really realize it, but I think that we have like a shame, you know, for being a widow.
Yeah. Like we did anything to make this happen or something.
And, you know, I think that we feel like we're being judged or we're being looked at weird and we didn't do anything wrong. But we still take that shame and we hold it and we carry it around. And I think that that's what holds us back, you know? And so I love that it hasn't held you back at all.
Well, I hated the word widow. And it sounded, I mean, it literally was like an assault to my heart. I just, at that, especially at a young age, you're just like, God has gently over time just brought me to a place of peace and acceptance over that. And the beauty of it, I mean, I think the more involved I am in this ministry and the more that I see how God loves the widow all throughout the Bible. And I don't know, I mean, I guess the title I never wanted has led me to a group of people that I never want to not know. I've met some of the most courageous and strong and beautiful women in this last 3.5 years. I'm like, my life is so much richer for now what I've gone through. 'Cause the pain cuts past all, look at us, we just met for the first time today and we could talk for 12 more hours straight. It cuts through all the superficial, small talk. It just, you get right to it because you've just been through too much. You don't, not that you can't talk about simple things, but you know, you have so many other more important things on your mind and heart that you're trying to navigate. And it's just makes me realize just so many other, I don't want to say shallow, but just not as much depth to what I talk about with so many other people. Then when I get with another widow, my gosh, it's just like instant on all levels, especially a believer, you know, who's, you know, loves the Lord and is experiencing widowhood. And so now I'm like, my gosh, I'm going to be married, but I'm holding on to my widow people forever because I just love them so much. And, you know,
you realize life is short and you realize that you have to keep moving. Like you can't stop. And like you said, when I talk to another widow, it's just like, it's a connection that you get, you know, it's instant. You just know that pain, it just brings out beauty. Right. And so it just brings this connection with a person. And so, that is a beautiful part of, you know, being a widow. And again, the widow is definitely one that God says to protect in the Bible. So, you know, he does have a special place in his heart for them. And I just, you know, of course, out of your beautiful love story, you talked a little bit about how you now are part of this group. And I know that we talked about how hard it is to find, you know, support, right? Especially at a young age. I think that becoming a widow at a young age, because I was 39. And so I didn't really, in my mind, I hated the word widow too. So when I first, you know, when Chris first passed, I was like, nobody needs to call me a widow, because to me, that's just, it's like dark. It has like this dark tone you hear about, like a black widow and stuff like that, right? And so I was like, no, don't call me a widow. Then I started seeing like all of these younger people, you know? And I feel like there's so much that needs to be, I guess you could say, done or said, or awareness that needs to be, you know, brought out so that we won't have that shame, that it's okay that, you know, we lost our spouse and now we're in this position and, you know, some of us are in a position of struggle or, you know, just we're being a statistic now or, you know, anything like that. And so I think that there's not enough support. There's not enough support. And so I definitely want you to talk about now, you know, what you
Never
do
alone.
and the group that you have. And, you know, I hope as many people find it and, you know, people that weren't looking, I hope they find it. And people that were, I hope they find it too. So,
you want me to share a little bit about it?
Yes, I do.
Yeah, so Never Alone Widows is a national ministry that was started years ago by a woman, Rachel Faulkner Brown, who was widowed twice before 30. And it started out more like I think, first responders, military spouses, widows of military spouses, and just wanting to do retreats, small little retreats for women, get them together and just love on them, lavishly love on them. And then I think it just quickly grew, saw that the need not just to be first responders or military, but just women are widowed every single day here. Young women, I think the average age is 59 in the United States, but that you did need community and you did need support. So they've kind of continued to just grow every single year. And so instead of just doing these retreats, they 3 years ago started a national conference, and that first one was in Atlanta, and over 300 women from around the United States came to that. And I went to that 3 years ago, which was 5 months after Dan had died. And it was just a catalyst of healing for me. And what I love about it is it's not just a widow group. It's the foundation is going to be Christ, is God. It's finding your purpose, knowing that if we're still here, God still has a good plan for us. And that, you know, one thing for me as a widow, and a believer is I knew that was where my healing was going to come from. And there's lots of good, just normal grief books and self-help books and things like that. But I mean, deep down, I knew where my true healing, those can all be surface level really good. But at the heart of the issue is that God is going to come in, and that's where my trust for where my life is and my plan is and stuff. And so I think Never Alone really focuses on that, in women, just letting them know that they are never alone, because that God is walking this journey out with them. He is caring. He is their father. He is going to provide for their children. He will fill in the gaps for the kids that are fatherless, because he promises to be a father to the fatherless. That's right. And that's like probably the two top fears for a widow is, are you going to provide for me? Because my protection and my provision, my head of household is now gone.
Yes.
And then what about my kids who will not have their dad any longer? How can I be a father when I'm meant to be the mother?
Right.
And, that strikes right to the heart of a woman and a mom and then a wife and stuff. And so I think speaking on those things, it just was a beautiful way for me to just show me that God still had a beautiful plan for my life, that I can trust in his goodness, that even though this world is so broken and dark and really bad things happen, that we do not want, things that we might never understand until eternity, God's plan, that he is working all things out for good and his glory, and just we can trust him. We can trust in his character. We can trust in his faithfulness. And so anyway, after that national conference, they had the idea of launching local chapters around the country. And so women like me, just who went back home, felt called, just a nudge from the Holy Spirit to say, hey, I can start a local chapter. So it took me, I wasn't ready when I came back. I was still early in my grief journey, but it's been a little over a year, and I started one in North Dallas, and now have close to 180 people in the online group, but close to 100 who have come over the past year to one of my monthly meetings. And we just get together and we just talk, and it's just like this. You're next to somebody who is walking the same road, who knows what you're going through, who may be further down the road than you, or had the same kind of cancer journey, or the same suicide journey, or the same, COVID journey. I mean, it's you get in and you realize, wow, like we're all have the same, and then some people are, very specific things that they need somebody to talk to, and so it's just a safe place to go and, find fellowship and community, and and then we hope people get plugged into their local churches, and we hope that local churches recognize the need to help the widow and to do more for the widow. And so, it's just an ongoing process to bring awareness, and healing. So,
because I think that sometimes we forget that we need community,
Yes. Yeah.
Sometimes, I know we were talking about it earlier, as far as like just not wanting to ask for help, and it's healthy to ask for help. And I'm that person that does not like to ask for help at all. Yeah. So I don't know if it's a pride thing, but I know that I'm working on trying to let that go. Yeah. But we need community. And so to just, be able to talk to someone and be able to, understand that God is so faithful. Yes. Like he is just so faithful, and he's always been there. Yeah.
And when you ask for help, you're allowing God to then prompt somebody else to use them to do his work. When we don't, and we're preventing people from being used as a blessing. We all need each other. So we need to reach out and help others. But if we don't allow them to know the needs that we have, then we're not giving anybody the chance to be prompted
That's
to
good.
help, you know?
I'm gonna write that down. I'm gonna write it down, and I'm gonna definitely work on it, because I mean, I get that. I get that. That's giving them the opportunity for God to work through them,
Yeah.
to bless us,
Yeah.
to get our blessings. So yes,
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
Talking to you today has been, it's been great.
That's
Like
okay.
I have really loved hearing your perspective. I love, how God is moving in your life. Yes. So I just love it. I don't know if I don't
Thanks.
have enough words to
Yeah.
explain it, but
I think we want people to know, because I don't know if, like you, since you've been widowed, but almost weekly, I'm contacted by a new widow who is going through that deepest, darkest moment that you and I felt 3.5 years ago, when our world was turned upside down almost in an instant. And you can't see past the darkness, because you're just like, I'll probably never truly smile again. I'll probably never fully laugh with pure laughter, have joy. And I think my goal to people is, I needed to see another widow further down the road from me that was living their life and loving their life again. I held on to that. The widows who, that it was still really dark for years down, not saying that I understand that journey, and everybody is different, but I knew I couldn't be watching a ton like that, because I had to know that it could be good.
Yes.
And I hope that I can be a reflection that I love my life now. It is good. There is grief. It has been hard, but my gosh, I love my life. I'm so happy with where I'm at, and I'm living a full, good life. And I'm excited about my.
You are. So that's your hopes. You have succeeded. You are. You are a reflection of that, for sure.
Good.
Like, just a breath of fresh air to kind of give hope, and just to see like your joy, and it's a lot. And I think that a person would just pray to be in that position to have that joy. So yes, you are definitely a reflection of that, for sure.
Yeah. Well, they can find you. Run after Jesus.
Yes, run after him, because I definitely, that's one thing for me. I was the exact same way when you was like, you didn't want to be stuck in a dark place, because that's how I was. I felt like I didn't want to be stuck. I didn't want to be depressed. And that moved me. I remember I just cried out to God. I was like, I can't do this without you.
Yeah.
Like, I cannot do this without you. And I knew I needed him. There wasn't going to be, like you said, the self-help books and the therapy. And not that I haven't been to therapy, but I knew that God was the only way for me.
Yeah.
And I can't even describe the joy that I had. Like, one day I was here, and out of all of the mess that I was going through, I was just saying to myself, like, the amount of joy that I'm feeling, I can't even describe it. Like, it was just, I don't know. It was just so, I don't know, it was breathtaking. And so I definitely would encourage every widow, of course, to find God and to chase him. And so yes, I thank you so much for coming to speak with me, and being on a Widow Story podcast.
Yes. Well, I'm excited to see where it goes, what you do, who you help. So
yes. So thank you. Yeah. Thank you guys for watching. If you made it this far and you haven't subscribed, please do so. Please make sure you like, and again, make sure that you share, because I know that this podcast, this episode is going to heal so many people. I have gotten so much from it. I can't even say how happy I am to speak with Sarah. The joy that she has in her story, and it's wonderful, and it's just a breath of fresh air to me, and I'm sure it's going to be a breath of fresh air to many other widows. So again, thank you, and until next time, see you later.